Hi everyone, welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. It is March 2025. I went to St. Thomas in November 2023. And one of the things that frustrates me most about myself is the things that I care the most about. I never get them done because I just put so much pressure on myself. Like, I want things to be perfect and then they just never get done. So I have been editing this video for like more than a year, but March is Virgin Islands History Month. So I'm gonna finish editing this and I'm going to put it up. Going to get it up. So I'm just popping in to explain the delay here. So let's go back in time more than a year and talk about this amazing trip that I got to take to St. Thomas. I can't wait to go back. I hope that it is soon. It's my favorite place that I've ever been, so let's talk about taking a trip to St. Thomas. Hi guys, welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. Today I wanted to talk about my trip to the US Virgin Islands, to St. Thomas in November of 2023. It's been like a month and a half since I went, so I just wanted to like go through my camera roll and just kind of tell the story of what we did while we were there. You know, first of all, just for my own memories so that I can look back on this video later and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, I kind of forgot that detail or whatever. And then also in case anyone ever travels there, maybe this video might be helpful to you as like a little bit of a travel guide. I didn't have a very typical trip, so it might not be that helpful. And then just also to share some of the history with you that I was there doing. So to back up the story a little bit, about 10 years ago, I started my master's degree in history, and I didn't know what I was going to write my thesis on, but one day I was at my father-in-law's house, and he's from St. Thomas, but I didn't know very much about his life or his history, and his wife had mentioned that there was a statue in St. Thomas of his grandfather, and they said that he was like the Martin Luther King Jr. of the Virgin Islands. And I was like, what? That's so interesting. And so I looked him up a little bit, and I was like, well, you know, in a history master's program, you take all these different classes and you have to write all these different papers, even if it's not like necessarily connected to your thesis. And so I was like, well, at least one of my papers I'll dedicate to doing research on Rothschild Francis, which is the name of his grandfather. And so I can't even remember which class it was for that I first started looking up this information, but I was so fascinated by his story that I just made my entire thesis and my entire master's journey about researching the US Virgin Islands, imperialism in the Caribbean just before World War I, and then also the connection between civil rights leaders in the Caribbean and the political leaders during the Harlem Renaissance, because so many of them were Caribbean Americans or Caribbean immigrants. So my thesis has been published on my blog for a long time. I didn't want it to be like behind a paywall, so I uploaded the PDF of it to my blog, which is linked down below, toocoolformiddleschool.com. If you search for Rothschild Francis, a lot of times that paper will come up, and I think his story is just so important and necessary for people to know. So when I was doing my research, I connected with some people from the Virgin Islands, a few professors from the University of the Virgin Islands, and so I just had a few contacts. I was on like some, email lists, and somehow I got connected to this library in St. Thomas. It's the Caribbean Genealogy Library. I went to one of their like Zoom lectures and got to learn more about Caribbean history, Virgin Islands history, and I was kind of in the chat. I remember I did not have my camera on because Jensen was little and he was like climbing all over me, but I was like, oh yeah, I wrote my thesis on Rothschild Francis. Does anybody there, know anything about him or want to connect and do some more research on him? And so, I just kind of like made a few connections that way. And then a few months ago, the president of that genealogy library emailed me and asked if I would like to do one of those Zoom lectures. They hold them like once a month or so. And she was like, would you like to do one on Rothschild Francis? And I was like, oh, sure, that would be so much fun. And I was kind of preparing for it and like just imagining doing it. And I was just thinking about how sad I would be if I was doing this presentation on Zoom right here in my office talking about Rothschild Francis and everybody else was in the Virgin Islands. I'm like, I want to be there too. And the date had already been set for right around Thanksgiving break. And so I was like, could I just come? Like, could I just fly there? Can I do the lecture in person? And she was like, oh, sure, if you want to. So I just kind of made up my mind, like, I have to make this happen. When I was doing my initial research, I just did not have the money to go. I don't really have the money to go now, but credit cards. I had a little bit of savings that I used for that. But you know, back then, as I was doing my master's degree, I was a teacher, but very early in my career. So when I first started my master's, the job that I had was a half-time position. That was all that was open. So I was not making much money at all. I was having to use student loans, you know, to help pay for my tuition. And then in order to do research, a lot of the times you have to travel. So I traveled to Washington, D.C. on my own money, spring break from my job and my own school. I went to Washington, D.C. to the archives, the National Archives there, and I was able to find a bunch of newspapers that Rothschild Francis had written in the 1920s and 30s. And so I spent days underground going through the archives, going through this paperwork, and there's like a machine, kind of like a scanner, and it like takes a picture of the document and you can save it to a little thumb drive. And so I got hundreds of those. I dug through like ACLU files and just got all this research. So it takes a ton of work and money to do this, but there isn't that much archival documentation in the Virgin Islands. So I didn't get to go there as a grad student, funding all of this on my own and with student loans, you know, so like that would have been a more expensive trip and I wouldn't have gotten as much documentation. So I never got to go there. My husband, whose father's from the Caribbean, from the Virgin Islands, has still never been there. So when I was trying to plan this trip, my husband already had a tournament that he had to go to. He's a basketball coach, so he couldn't go, but I was like, I'm just gonna force this to happen. Like, I'm going. And he didn't want me to go by myself, but I was telling my mom and dad about it, and my mom doesn't really like to travel that much, but my dad does, and he just like needed an opportunity, so he was like, well, I'll go with you. And I was like, okay, let's go. So we booked our flights. I flew up to Northern California where my parents live, and I dropped off Jensen and Mariah there because Derek was going to be in Arizona at a tournament. So we sent our kids to hang out with my mom for the week, and then me and my dad flew out of San Francisco. We flew over to North Carolina and then down to St. Thomas, to the Charlotte Amalie airport. And it's further than you think. So I thought the flight from North Carolina to the Virgin Islands wouldn't be that long, but it was like 5 hours or something. So it's a bit of a journey. So we went again during late November, and they all were telling us that it was like just after hurricane season. So it's kind of a nice time to visit. When we arrived, we were there on a weekend and there were no cruise ships in the harbor. So most of the people on the island, it's kind of like time off then, because most tourists come with the cruise ships. And so, you know, if there's not a cruise ship in the harbor, then, you know, things are a little bit more low key. The thing that was going on though is at the University of the Virgin Islands, there was a basketball tournament going on, a college basketball tournament. And that was really cool. I really wanted to go. I was going to try and like fit that into our plans, but we just had a couple days. So I want to go back next year for that. That looked really cool. So my dad and I arrived at the airport, and then there are like kind of like shuttle buses at the airport. It's a pretty small airport, and they'll take you to whatever hotel you're staying at. So they'll just kind of ask you, like, so everyone who's at like Bluebeard, like they kind of get them all into a van, and we were staying at a hotel called the Windward Passage, so they got all of us together, and then they'll take you over to your hotel. Or you can rent a car, and we didn't want to do that because the cars are just like the cars we drive here, but then they drive on the other side of the road. And so I didn't trust myself to do that. And we had a lot of people there who were willing to give us rides and stuff. So we arrived on a Friday night. We got to our hotel. The Windward Passage is, I think it's a nice hotel. It's fine. Our room was pretty small. It was me and my dad, so we wanted to make sure we had like, you know, 2 separate beds. So we had our separate beds, and then there's a bathroom, and that's about it. But we were like very easy travelers. Like, me and my dad travel well together because we're just kind of both like, we'll just kind of roll with whatever. We just kind of wanted to like, you know, make it as affordable as possible and just, you know, take advantage of the time that we were there. So we got to the hotel, dropped off our stuff. It's warm all the time. Even at night, it feels so good. It's just kind of like 80 degrees all the time, like year round, morning, noon, and night. It's just like always warm. So you don't really need like a jacket or a sweatshirt or anything like that. So we walked around. It was already dark, you know, it had just been daylight savings like the week before, so it got dark pretty early, like, you know, like 5:30, and that was about the time we arrived. So we just walked from our hotel, which isn't in the nicest neighborhood, but it's fine. Like it's not super touristy. It's like not where like the yachts are gonna pull up and where you have a lot of people who are staying in like fancy hotels or anything. It's just like, you know, like a normal hotel. So I could see how some people, like, I don't know, maybe wouldn't walk around there, but it's fine. It's fine. So we just walked a couple blocks and I wanted to find Rothschild Francis' statue. So that's the very first thing we did. Okay, I'm documenting the first time that I'm seeing the Rothschild Francis statue. And this is where it is. There's actually 3 other statues. So this is J. Antonio Jarvis's statue, and I have some of his books, and then this is Edith Williams, and something was named after her today, I saw, so I'll have to look her up a little bit more. And then behind us is the post office, and behind them, I think, is like the governor's mansion. We're gonna get up early and come back in the daytime, but hi, Rothschild. The statue of the man who I've spent so many years of my life dedicated to. Like, his legacy is my, like, mission in life, basically. I got to see his statue for the first time. It was dark. There were, like, not many people around, but I just had to go see it. I, like, took a picture, and I kind of chose that hotel because it was a good deal and it was very near the statue. I was like, I want to go to the statue, like, every day, like a couple times every day. I just want to be near it. So it's across from like the post office, and then there are 3 statues all right there, and it's an area called Educator Square. The way that things are set up is like parallel to the ocean. There are kind of wider streets. So there's one along the ocean and then one like set back a little bit. That's where Rothschild Francis' statue is. And then in between like this perpendicular, you have like passageways. So there's like Drake's Passage or whatever passage. And then within the passages, that's where all of like your little shops and restaurants and stuff like that are. And the stone and everything that was used to build these structures is from like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so that keeps things kind of like protected from like hurricane season and stuff like that. So it's really cool to like walk around and like go through these passages, and then once everything is closed, then there's like gates that like lock everything up. So there was a restaurant, there was only like one restaurant open, so we went to that one. It's called like Green something. We ate dinner there. They have, you know, typical American food pretty much. I think there's a lot of like American tourists. They also give you little Johnny cakes, which are super good. They're exactly like fry bread. Like if you've ever had like Native American fry bread, they're super good. I loved those. So then we were trying to like walk through the passages a little bit, and most things were closed. There was this little dress shop open though, this super cute dress shop, and there were like 4 ladies in there just kind of hanging out. So we poked our heads in and they're like, come on in, come check it out. And so we would like tell them about what we were doing there, like that I was there to give a lecture and do more research on Rothschild Francis. I printed out little stickers like this and took them everywhere with me and just like gave them to all the people that I met and talked to. And some people had heard of him, but a lot of people hadn't. So it was really cool to just kind of like, you know, talk about St. Thomas history and, you know, what had happened in Charlotte Amalie 100 years ago and all this really cool stuff. So I didn't buy any dresses, but one of the ladies, like her son, had his own t-shirt company. This isn't one of their t-shirts, but I have some other ones that were like really cool and St. Thomas inspired, and so I bought those for like family. I think we went to a convenience store after that and just got like some waters and chips and stuff in case we were hungry. Because again, most things just like were not open because there was no cruise ship in town, so people were kind of chilling. One of the ladies who we met said that her family owned like a restaurant, like a diner, and invited us to go there for breakfast the next morning. So we went to bed kind of early because there was just like not much to do. So we went to bed, got up the next day, went to breakfast. On our way there, I went and said hello to Rothschild Francis again, took more pictures of his statue. And then we went to Gladys's Cafe, which is the cutest place. So you go through one of these passages and there's a bunch of different, you know, businesses that you could go into. And then we found Gladys's, and the food was so good. We saw the girls that we had been talking to the night before. We got to talk to them a little bit more. and that part was just amazing. We explored that kind of downtown area a little bit more. Dronningens is like Main Street, so a lot of the names are Danish because the US purchased these islands from the Danish. There's a lot of that history still there. We still had some time to kill, so we just like walked along the ocean and just like enjoyed the beautiful scenery. You've got the ocean on one side, you have like mountains on the other side. Everything is just beautiful, and it's like the perfect temperature. It's just like I never wanted to leave there, and I want to go back as soon as possible. We walked past the legislature building. That was really funny because they had this parking spot for like employee of the year, and it was like really crooked. I don't know, we just like thought that was hilarious. There was also a agricultural fair going on, and so we went to the agricultural fair and tried some fruit. We bought a few more gifts for family. We stopped by Fort Christian, which is a national landmark. I went back to the statues again. Oh, I went and found, okay, so like on the newspapers that Rothschild Francis published, which he did in order to like spread awareness about the civil rights that Virgin Islanders should have, since they were now under the control of the United States, but they were not being given. And so he was fighting for those civil rights to be extended into the territory of the Virgin Islands. So he had this newspaper called The Emancipator, and I believe that he ran it out of his shoe store. He also owned a shoe store. And so it has the address on it. So I found the address and I went there. And it is now a place called Alpha Jewelers. There are tons and tons of jewelry stores in Charlotte Amalie. You can get good deals on jewelry because you don't have to pay tax or tariff or duties or whatever. I don't know. I'm not like a jewelry person, so I didn't buy any jewelry. But if you walk along that street, there's a bunch of jewelry stores and they'll like try to sell you jewelry. So I did go in though, just to like look around, and I told them about how, you know, this used to be like this really important place where a newspaper was published. And then we walked through a few more passageways, walked back to our hotel, and then we met up with the president of the Caribbean Genealogy Society. Her name is Sophia. She picked us up and drove us to the library, or I've been saying it wrong, it's the Caribbean Genealogy Library. So you can, you know, go to the library. It's a pretty small place. It's like one big room basically, and they have a bunch of books, and they just kind of archive a lot of the history of St. Thomas and the other islands. So this was like the whole reason I went on the trip, right? I got to do my presentation. So it was like in person, but then like we also shared it on Zoom. So I was like brought back to the memories of, you know, Zoom teaching. I was like a little bit rusty with sharing everything, but there were a lot of people there. It was like a full house. Yeah, I mean, it's a small place, so full house is like 25 people. But you know, these people were there. They wanted to hear about this amazing man. And then there were other people on Zoom. And so I talked for a long time, I'm sure. It was like over an hour. I gave my lecture, talked all about my research, my master's thesis, and, you know, like a little bit of our family history, because that's what people kind of wanted to know, because that's what they do there, you know, the genealogy library. And a lot of people there knew a lot about Rothschild Francis, and they knew things that I didn't know. So like, it's so hard to travel as like a grad student, but I definitely wish that just like somehow I had been able to, because it's so hard to write about a place that you haven't been to, and like to write a history of a place that you can't like make the connections to in your mind, you know. I don't know, like now that I can see like the place where he wrote his newspaper. So anyway, it was very cool to get to go there, and then to just hear the perspective of these people who had always heard legends that he like escaped from the islands as a coal woman. I hadn't heard the history of the coal women who would like have bags of coal on their head and refill the ships, because Charlotte Amalie, St. Thomas was like a gas station essentially. So that's kind of like a local legend. Rothschild Francis had this kind of nemesis named Alton Adams. This is a book about him. And we found out that Alton Adams' grandchild and Rothschild Francis's grandchild ended up marrying, and they have kids and everything. And so I was talking to one lady about that, like we just found that hilarious. And so just, you know, finding out more about how the people there have learned the history of Rothschild Francis, because some of them do know it, and like the way that they've kept his memory alive. was really important. I wish I had been able to incorporate that in my original research, but you know, I would like to do more. So we stayed there for a long time. I talked to a lot of people. Also, before I left, I had my students, my 6th grade history students, learn about Rothschild Francis and do this activity where they read about him and then like kind of drew a picture of him and wrote facts about him. So I brought that lesson with me and gave it to a local teacher and gave, you know, the finished products that my students had made, gave them to this teacher. So they are there now. And then like when I was doing the Zoom presentation, I have all these quotes from Rothschild Francis, right? And so then I just asked, I was kind of thinking more like for the people in the room, but like when we read his quotes, I asked if anybody would be willing to read them, because you know they're listening to my voice the whole time and I don't sound like him. So I was like, yeah, maybe somebody who sounds a little bit more like him, maybe you could read his quotes. So there was this guy on the Zoom call and he volunteered and he read the quotes every time and it just sounded amazing. It was like so powerful. Like I think that was everyone's favorite part of the presentation, was just like hearing his words in a man's voice with that Caribbean accent, and it like gave everyone chills. It was so good. So the presentation went great. I have to say, it was awesome. The audience was awesome. The information was great. They were interested. It was just so much fun. I was able to talk about this thing that I'm so passionate about with people who already had the basis, you know, like basic understanding of it, could totally follow. We could go a little further with this story because they knew the basics, you know. So I got to talk to a lot of people afterwards who were very excited, and everyone is like telling me I need to like move there, do my PhD, continue this story. We don't know where he's buried. Like after he moved to New York, the trail kind of goes cold. So I would love to, like if I was doing a PhD, then I would maybe have the resources to kind of follow the trail. I've looked at like graveyards, tried to find like where he's buried and stuff like that, like probably in Brooklyn, and it's really hard to find. So I still need to do that, but I didn't have answers for people at this point. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know the rest of the story. So we're all very interested. We want to find out what happened after he moves to New York and, you know, flees the Virgin Islands. So anyway, there's more work to be done. So there were some really cool ladies who are volunteers with the library, and they took me and my dad out to dinner after that. So they took us on like a tour of the island. You can drive from one end of St. Thomas to the other in like 30 minutes. It's pretty small, but they drove us up into the hills. We like stopped at the top and got to just, it's an amazing view to just like look out at the bay and everything below you from the top of the island. I can't wait to go back. So anyway, we went out to dinner with them for just hours. It was so much fun talking with them. Jane and Sophia's husband met us later. And oh my gosh, it was just so much fun. We went to a restaurant near like one of the private schools. Man, I should have written down the names of all the restaurants we went to. If I remember, I'll put them all in here. I'll make like, I want to like compile all this information, you know, so I can go back and reference it later. So that was Saturday, I think. So then the next day, Sunday, we went on a walking tour pretty early in the morning with this lady named Anna Monica, who we met at the library the day before. She's another like volunteer with the library. She's a local historian. She lived in Denmark for quite a while, but she's from St. Thomas, so she knows the history of both places. She took us on a walking tour, taught us a ton about the Danish history and like the native history. It was so cool. We took so many cool pictures. She showed us so much stuff that we never would have known. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then we ate breakfast. We went to another little cafe and had breakfast. Anna Monica drove us to Megan's Bay. I'm like, oh, Megan, it's spelled differently, but beautiful. It's gorgeous. We've done so much walking and touring, so it's nice to have a little relaxing day at the beach. We have another history tour a little bit later, so I'll try to get more of that. It's hard to get out my phone and my camera all the time, but oh, I need sunglasses, man. That's bright. You know, we just wanted like a little bit of like beach time, ocean time. Since we were there on the island, we weren't gonna do much of that, but we wanted to have like a little taste of the tourist life. So we went to Megan's Bay. It's gorgeous. Like, I live in California where the beaches suck, but Virgin Islands beaches, Atlantic Ocean is amazing. You know, it's a bay, so it's just like super calm. I don't know if it's just like extra salty or what. I'm not a good swimmer at all, but I could swim out like super far and just like with hardly any effort, just like lay back and like float in the water. I'm very buoyant, I don't know. So we got to swim, you know, just kind of like chill on the beach a little bit. And then a friend from high school who I hadn't talked to like since high school, she's just like not really on social media, you know, so I like lost contact with her kind of, but she recently like got Facebook, I guess, because she was moving to the Virgin Islands and she was kind of trying to like let people know that that's where they were moving. And so she saw a post that I made about going to St. Thomas and she was like, oh, we just moved here last week. It's like, what? So we met up with her family and she has 4 little kids and her husband works for the Coast Guard. So he just got like stationed there. So I got to hang out with her, you know, catch up with her after so many years. And it was just, every moment of the trip was just incredible. And like a couple times that day, because she was getting her kids into school. They were trying to, you know, kind of figure out the whole school situation. And I was like, well, kids are off right now, right? And this was like the second time I had asked that question. And she was like, no, why? And I was like, because it's summer, you know? And everyone's like, it's not summer, it's November. And I was like, oh my gosh, like just like 2 days off of work in a Caribbean island, I was like fully transported into summer and like forgot that I had a job and forgot what month it was, forgot what season it was. Like I was just so in vacation mode. So that was definitely one of our favorite times of the trip. And why is my battery dying again? After that, we met up with somebody who had been in the Zoom portion of the lecture and he was a senator, Senator Jackson. He like recently retired from being a senator. And he is very involved in like local history and preserving Rothschild Francis's memory. And so he had already started this project with the Library of Congress to like document Rothschild Francis's history. So he invited us out to dinner to talk about my research. We went to the statue, of course. He took us to Rothschild Francis Square or Market Square, you know, which is named after Rothschild Francis. And then we went to like a house that he thought had maybe been owned by Rothschild Francis. We kind of determined that it probably wasn't. It was more like his descendants who lived in that house. And we spoke to this lady who was 98 years old and in much better shape and like sharper than I am now. She was incredible and she told us a little bit of the history of living in this neighborhood called Savan. That's where my father-in-law grew up as well. It's really not a tourist area, but so I felt a little bit uncomfortable being there, and we had like, you know, we're taking pictures and stuff because it's not like, no one there signed up to be like a tourist spot. This is just like where people live, but you know, they're trying to kind of document this local history. We went back to the statue. We went to like this, they were having a fundraiser for a Christmas event where there's like a choir performance. And so they were trying to raise money, you know, at this point for the Christmas event. And it was like a concert. So we went there, and then my dad and I went out to dinner with Mr. Jackson, which was so much fun. We went down to the area like where the yachts come in and stuff. So that's a little bit more like commercial. We hadn't been there yet. And there was like a band playing, a live band. And my dad was telling Mr. Jackson that I sing. And so he was like, okay, well, you'll be singing tonight. I was like, what? So they knew the band. Everyone knows everyone. And especially everyone knows Senator Jackson. Every single place we went, everybody knew him. And he would like, you know, talk to them, knew their names and everything. So of course he knew the band, and then like told them like, okay, you know, partway through the night, like she's gonna get up and sing. So I sang a Alicia Keys song. People go to dinner and, you know, have meals for a long time there. So we stayed out to dinner for a long, long time. And then finally went back to our hotel room, and we were just like, we spent almost zero time in the hotel room besides sleeping, because we were just busy from morning till night. And we didn't really make any of these plans ahead of time. We just, as soon as we started meeting people, they're just like, okay, we'll take you here, and then they'll pick you up from here, and you guys can do this, and they'll take you here and show you that. It was awesome. So then the next day we were leaving, that was Monday. And so Senator Jackson wanted to meet again for breakfast. So we woke up, went to breakfast with him at Le Petit Pump, I think that's the name of the cafe there. And we sat by the water, and he had a video camera and wanted to like record a little bit more information about my research that he could include in his project for the Library of Congress. So we got to talk to him. It was very, very fun. Like one of the most rewarding things in my life was just being able to sit there and just have this back and forth, this conversation with him about the thing that I'm an expert in. He's very, very much an expert in it as well. And just be able to just have this amazing conversation about Virgin Islands history and how important Rothschild Francis's legacy is. And it was awesome. So, I mean, after that, we had to run back to the hotel, get our luggage, and go to the airport and head out. So, I mean, it was a very quick trip. I cannot wait to get back. I want to meet up with all the people that we met. Again, there's more work to be done. Rothschild Francis published his legislation that he presented before Congress to get civil rights for Virgin Islanders in 1924. So now that it's 2024, this is, you know, the 100-year anniversary of that. So I feel like we need to do something to commemorate that. And I need to get all of, I'm not one of his descendants, so we need to get all of his descendants, my husband and his family, there to, you know, just see what their ancestor accomplished and like the legacy of their family. It's just, it's so powerful. It's amazing. I'll make like a blog post or something that accompanies this where I can include everywhere we stayed, you know, all of the places we ate, everything we did. It's definitely not a very touristy type, it's not a vacation-y type of thing that we did, but I loved it. It was so much fun, and it was more on the affordable side. And I felt like we were able to, you know, go there and have like a respectful trip that respected the people who live there and kind of, you know, honored Rothschild Francis's legacy and wasn't you know, just all about like taking things for ourselves. You know, we wanted to be there and learn from the people there. And, you know, I wanted to share my research. That was so much fun, but I learned so much from the people there as well. They have kept his memory alive. I wouldn't have anything. I wouldn't have been able to find any of the research without them keeping it alive for the past 100 years. So before my camera dies, thank you for talking about my trip with me. I loved it so much, and I can't wait to go back. I want to go like twice a year, every year. I want my kids to go and see where their ancestors are from, and like this is a part of them, and I just can't wait for them to see it. So excited. All right, I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much. Bye.